Hello and welcome. I am Jeffrey Martin, Director of the University of Georgia Performing Arts Center. Thank you so much for joining us today for the second installment of Arts Chats, part of our virtual programming series this fall. We opened this series 2 weeks ago with a visit by Leah Salonga, and we are thrilled to welcome Robert Spano, another musician of great stature, to the broadcast today. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that this recording will be archived on the Performing Arts Center's website shortly after the conclusion of this broadcast. And I hope you will join us again as we continue to offer performances and events on our virtual concert series this fall by many esteemed artists, including the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, Peachtree String Quartet, Kathy Matea, and Voces 8. Our next Arts Chat will take place on October 12th and will feature the highly anticipated conversation with trumpeter Wynton Marsalis. So I hope you will join us at that time. Now on with today's show. I'm pleased to introduce Robert Spano, who is a conductor, pianist, composer, and teacher. He became the fourth music director of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra in September 2001. And has enjoyed a rich and well-received tenure there during that time. He is currently preparing to launch his 20th season with the orchestra next week. An avid mentor to rising artists, Robert is responsible for nurturing the careers of numerous celebrated composers, conductors, and performers. As music director of the Aspen Music School and Festival since 2011, he oversees the programming of more than 300 events and educational programs for 630 students and young performers. Maestro Spano has had guest engagements at the Cleveland, Philadelphia, and Minnesota orchestras, the New York and Los Angeles Philharmonics, and the San Francisco, Boston, Chicago, San Diego, Oregon, Utah, and Kansas City symphonies. Internationally, he has led orchestras from Italy to Japan and Amsterdam to Australia. His opera performances include Covent Garden, the Welsh National Opera, Lyric Opera of Chicago, Houston Grand Opera, and many others. He made his Metropolitan Opera debut in 2018, leading the U.S. premiere of Nico Muhly's opera Marnie. The Atlanta School of Composer reflects Spano's commitment to American contemporary music, which we will talk with him a little bit more shortly. He has led the ASO in performances at Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, and the Ravinia, Ojai, and Savannah music festivals. Robert has garnered 6 Grammy Awards with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra and is one of 2 classical musicians inducted into the Georgia Music Hall of Fame. And last but definitely not least, he has conducted the ASO on the stage of Hodson Concert Hall here in the University of Georgia Performing Arts Center many times, and we certainly look forward to welcoming him and the orchestra back to Athens as soon as possible. Now, please welcome Robert Spano. Hello.
So good to be with you.
It's great to be with you as well. Thank you for taking some time to join us today.
It's a pleasure.
Now, I thought I would just jump right in because we're in such a unique time. When you joined the Atlanta Symphony, it was in September 2001, so right around the time of the 9/11 attacks. And here we are in a very unique time in the history of America during this pandemic. I just wondered if you could maybe talk a little bit about what was that like stepping in at that time, and are there any comparisons to what is happening today and in maybe your approach to handling those situations?
Well, I think you've hit something that is true, that the almost chaotic feeling of the time is comparable to what it felt like then in some strange way. And I think one of the hardest things for a big behemoth of an organization like the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra or many American orchestras is to programmatically respond to what's going on in the world, because we plan so far out. We often are planning 3 years ahead, 5 years ahead, what we're doing, when we're doing it, who's coming, who's the soloist, who's the conductor. These plans are so far in advance. But in these cases, I remember with 9/11, we were supposed to open a week later, and my colleague, Donald Runnicles, and I were going to share that program because we were both starting our tenure, I as music director and he as principal guest conductor. And he couldn't get here, and we didn't particularly want to continue with the program that we had planned, which was quite festive and upbeat and seemed wholly inappropriate for a time when there was so much grief and sadness. So I remember going through my score library with Alison Bulgamore, who was then the executive director of the orchestra. And we were trying to think, well, what can we do that could possibly speak to this moment, that could possibly carry the weight of the emotional intensity that everyone was feeling. We ended up programming the Pathétique Symphony of Tchaikovsky. And I remember the piece took on a completely different aura, had a completely different affect for me than any other time I've done it. And it did feel like it was speaking directly to what we had just experienced. And it was cathartic. It was full of the grief that so many of us were feeling, but it was also full of beauty and hope, and I believe gave us all a chance to process something for which there were no words. So here again, with this pandemic, for so long we couldn't do anything at all, and now we are trying to reignite ourselves. We're back on stage. We were rehearsing all day today. And last week we were on stage. The week before that, we had a number of chamber groups from the orchestra come in because we did a kind of ramp up, COVID protocols, microphones, cameras, seating, social distancing as an orchestra. So we had a lot to learn and experiment with and set ourselves up for now, preparing an opening week that we're going to release in a week. And we're very excited about that. It's very strange to work this way, but it's so wonderful to be back together after 6 months of not making music live together. It's unfortunate to me that we won't be able to share the music live with our audiences yet. We hope and look forward to the day that we can have socially distanced audience. But right now we're trying to be very faithful to the under 50 gatherings, which is our statewide agreement. And that means since we have staff and other people involved in any rehearsal, we're working with an orchestra that's never more than 35 people. So clearly we had to change a lot of the repertoire to accommodate the fact that we're going to be working with a chamber orchestra for a while. So all our programming choices between now and the new calendar year are currently under that restriction. We have plans for after the new year that if we can start to expand, we will. If we can't, we won't. As soon as we can get audience, we will. And if we can't, we won't. We're working very much on the idea that doing something is better than nothing. So we're doing everything we can do. And it's been wonderful to be back together. It's just, I knew we were all starving, those of us who love live music. But I don't think I knew how much until I heard live music again. And you realize, oh, it's just incomparable. There is no substitute. And it's nourishment. It's food.
I would love to have been a fly on the wall at Symphony Hall as you took the podium for that very first time and heard those first few notes played. I'm sure it was really special.
It's been fantastic to get going again. Yeah.
Now, what's been the response of the musicians as you've come up with the new size of the ensemble, and I'm sure they're spaced out on stage, and how are they coping with all of that?
That's a big challenge because we have, in addition to the distancing on stage, we have wind players are surrounded by plexiglass. So the baffling can be baffling to the musicians as well, because it affects hearing, the distance affects hearing. So we're sort of learning as we go what we can hear, what we can't, when they need more information from me. What we can latch on to often is a critical thing to identify. And it's amazing how quickly they're adjusting. Today I took an opportunity to go up into the recording booth, and I had our assistant conductor conduct while I went to listen. And it is astonishing how quickly people have adjusted to this rather challenging circumstance. I was thinking, though, that in the past, we have done a number of performances where, especially when we've done operatic productions, where we're in very strange setups. The orchestra has been in many very strange setups. And so there's something about our experience of overcoming these kinds of obstacles, I think, has helped us in this case too. But it is a challenge.
And so for those of us who are watching that might not be familiar with what specific plans you have for programming and how that's going to work this fall, do you want to just kind of talk a little bit about that? You're only doing virtual concerts, it sounds like, right?
That's right. And most of our programs will be between an hour and 15 minutes. They will all adhere to those numbers. So some of the things coming up, there's a program of all Haydn with Donald Runnicles, which is Haydn 60th Symphony, and our wonderful principal cellist Rainer will be playing the Haydn D major cello concerto. I have this opening week for us is Gil Shaham is joining us playing Beethoven Violin Concerto, and we're doing the Mozart Jupiter Symphony. I have another program when Kelly O'Connor will be with us, where we're doing a new arrangement of Ravel's Scheherazade for 9 instruments to accompany her. And on that program, we'll also do the Ravel Tombeau de Couperin and the Ravel Mother Goose Suite, and a wonderful piece of Alvin Singleton's. And another program I have is mostly, well, I guess I should say it's all Baroque. There is a Hertel bassoon concerto featuring our principal bassoon, Andrew Brady, and we'll do the Bach Third Orchestral Suite and a big chunk of Handel's Water music. So there's that Baroque program as well. So I think that kind of gives you the flavor that we're not suffering because we're doing smaller orchestra things. There's a wealth in that repertoire as well. And so it's actually wonderful to get to do it.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like, the Atlanta Symphony is probably like a lot of other arts organizations right now. You have plan A and plan B and maybe even plan C and D. So
yeah.
How did you start? Because you did announce a full regular season back in the spring for this fall. How did you start to approach this idea of reconfiguring the programs?
Well, initially, actually, we started from a false premise. We believed we were going to be able to get 60 people on stage in the orchestra. And so we planned a bunch of programs that worked in that way. And then, no, we had to get down to 35. So we started over on that. And when we did the planning for 60, we also planned smaller and bigger. So we have programs that are ready to go even in this fall that would be chamber music, really, if that becomes necessary. And then we also have ways of expanding the numbers if we're able to do that. So we've been making plans that give us the flexibility that we can hopefully turn almost on a dime to accommodate what's possible.
Oh, that's fantastic. I know this has really required a lot of creative thinking from administrators and artists alike, as we seem like we're pivoting all the time, and we're trying to predict the future all the time. I feel what are the conditions going to be like in a month, 2 months, 6 months? It's pretty tricky.
It's so difficult. I finally have given up. I just don't try to predict anymore. I give up. We do not know what's going to happen, so we'll just be ready for anything.
Now, the ASO, if I'm correct, is one of the few American Orchestras who's actually doing some live programming this fall, I think. Is that, how would you say, what's the impact of this pandemic, more broadly speaking, on the orchestral world? Do you have a sense for that?
I think it's been brutal. There are orchestras who have closed their doors for this entire season. There are many orchestras that have at least closed their doors until the new calendar year. There are very few orchestras trying to do what we're trying to do. And I'm happy that we're among the few who are able to try and do what we're doing now, because it is a blessing to be able to make live music together again. So it's had it's been a blow. It's just been really, I think, painful for very many people. And it is all the Zoom activity and the online musical activity. It's been wonderful that it exists, but it is still true that it's not the same. So the sooner we get back to having audiences, the better. I do know a number of other musicians in my life who have been doing concerts outdoors and socially distanced audience. And we're looking to try and do that as well here in Atlanta. So that's one way that we can potentially start having live audiences sooner rather than later.
Oh, that's great. That would be wonderful. Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit just about your tenure at the Atlanta Symphony, and if you think about some of the exciting projects and things that you've worked on or programmed. Of course, I will assume that one of your highlights is always coming to Athens to perform at the University of Georgia.
We love it. We absolutely love it.
In fact, I have a photo here of a recent performance of you conducting the orchestra. That's back when we could all get up close together, of course. But as you think about some of the activities you've done with the orchestra over the years, what are some of those projects that have been highlights for you?
Oh, gosh, there's so much. I feel so lucky. I came to Atlanta hoping to stay a long time. I didn't know exactly what that meant, but in my life, at that point in my life, when I was 40, basically, I had the Brooklyn Philharmonic, which was a wonderful orchestra, but it was not a full-time orchestra. And I was itinerant beyond belief. I was conducting all over the world all the time. I was always traveling. And we did, I think, 5 subscription weeks a year in Brooklyn. So it just was a different kind of animal than the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra or the Chicago Symphony or the Boston Symphony, any of the big full-time orchestras. So I wanted one. And I remember that Atlanta was among a few other orchestras at the time who were looking for a music director. There was just a lot of musical chairs going on at that time. And I really wanted to come here, and so I was sure it wouldn't happen because I don't know, that's the way I look at things often. Get your hopes up.
Yeah.
And so when I got the call, I was just thrilled. And the part of it that was important to me was to invest over a long period of time with the same group of people, with the same institution, and see what kinds of rewards there are in that kind of long-standing relationship, as opposed to guest conducting all the time. And I've gotten exactly what I wanted. I maybe 5 years in, I stopped feeling like it was me and the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, and I just felt like it was us. And at this point, I've hired over half the orchestra myself. So the orchestra is now constituted out of a lot of the choices we've made in hiring that have been since I've been here. So it's my musical family in so many ways now. And I think part of the gift of having a long-standing relationship like that is the mutual understanding that occurs, or the degree that there are things you just don't even have to talk about anymore. You just know, and it makes the work go to a deeper, more sophisticated, more refined level more quickly, and that's such a joy. And the other thing is, when you're really staying with an institution long enough, you get to do all the kinds of crazy things we've done. So you don't have the opportunity to do things necessarily like a staged version of the St. John Passion if you're not the music director. And that's, for me, one of the great highlights were the Bach Passions that we did, and we put them in a theatrical setting. Certainly some of the operas that we've done are highlights in my mind, when we did Dr. Atomic, when we did Flowering Tree. And then another thing that for me has been very special is what we build as theater of a concert. So it wasn't necessarily an opera, but we were doing something with a theatrical setting, with a visual or lighting or even technological enhancement of the experience. So, for instance, when we did Creation Creator of Chris Theophanides a few years ago, and we took that to the Kennedy Center, that was a perfect example of this, creating a kind of performance experience that is not like a usual concert. And then, of course, for me, I had not recorded much. I had done some recording until I came to Atlanta. And then initially when I was here, we were still making 3 recordings a year with Telarc. And that had been a long relationship with Telarc. And so just the process of recording, because we were doing recordings in sessions. We weren't doing live recordings at that time. We were doing recording sessions. And the opportunity to work with someone as brilliant as Elaine Martone, who was our producer for all those recordings with Telarc, it opened up a whole new world for me, that whole process and that way of making music. And I think right tied into just being able to record all that repertoire was being able to record so much new music. Because the other thing that I had hoped was that we would be able to develop long-standing relationships with a number of American composers and provide them with a platform in the world, because I had been a great admirer of Leonard Slatkin's work in St. Louis, where he championed so many American composers of his generation. And I really thought that we were poised to be able to do that. So I was quite determined to have a focus on American composers of my generation, knowing that other places were taking care of a lot of other agendas around new music, and that this was a particular niche we could help the whole world with. And then after we had done that, a few years in, I realized that there was something happening with this group that had sort of emerged just from our practice of working with them, that they had something in common aesthetically, that they represented a generational shift in American music. And it was a palpable thing. That's not that they were all the same by any means. They're very distinguished from each other in so many ways. But I realized I had to talk at a board meeting, a retreat, and I was supposed to kick off the retreat with something inspirational. And I'm walking to the meeting with a coffee thinking, what am I going to talk about? It was during that walk to work that I realized, oh, there's something going on with our composers that's really incredibly special. And it occurred to me, they all work tunefully. They all have an interest in melodic material that the generation of their teachers didn't necessarily have. They all work with tonality in some very sophisticated way. And they were all influenced by popular music or world music or both. And when I realized that, I thought, well, this is a school. This is like recognizing Les Six at the beginning of the 20th century in Paris, or the Big Five in Russia, or the Empfindsamkeit in 18th century Germany. This was a real historically notable aesthetic phenomenon of this generation of American composers. And I did get all excited. And so I did have a lot to talk about when I finally made it to that retreat. And then we realized, well, we might as well have a little hubris about this. We won't just call them a School of American Composers. They'll be the Atlanta School of Composers. So the Atlanta School was actually something not that we did by design so much as identify. The design was to create these relationships, but then it was to identify the body of work that was emerging in that way. And so the school always meant a school in the sense of a school of fish, that they were swimming together, not necessarily an educational process. And that's been an amazing phenomenon. And I'm just so lucky that we had these brilliant, and then the school was expanding. People come in and out of the school building. There are other people who are like grandparents to the school. There are cousins. It's been great to have that kind of loose family of composers. And then, as it turns out, because we were disseminating their music through the recording process, a couple of them have become the most played composers alive in the world. And it's just been wonderful to see the trajectory of the appreciation of their music just take off in the world. And it's been a real gift to me, because I love working with living composers. I have trouble getting Mozart on the phone. And so if you have questions about the music, you have someone to talk to. And I love trying to get inside their imagination, their ear, their quest for something in writing the music that they do. And it's just been wonderful. So I think those highlights stick in my mind. And the other one is exploring the choral repertoire, as I've been able to do here, because I had worked plenty with choruses, but to live with this great chorus, with the legacy of Robert Shaw, with the incredible expertise of Norman Mackenzie, who's really carried on that tradition and helped it evolve and flower and become even richer. And to explore that magnificent repertoire with them has been unbelievable too, because that music, given the standing of the chorus here in Atlanta, that music benefits from this institution in ways that are just unimaginable in many other circumstances, in other cities and other places. And they have been such a wonderful gift to do not only all the standard repertoire, but even some of the exploratory repertoire we've done, the commissions we've done for the chorus, the new music we've done with the chorus that maybe we didn't commission, is as well as the Requiems Are Us part of the repertoire, which is also wonderful. It's just been magnificent. They're magnificent.
They are wonderful. And I'm just thinking now how, as you're talking through these things, the Atlanta Symphony as an organization seems, it just seems like a prime example of what can happen artistically when a board who supports a vision of ambitious artists and the resources are available from the musician's side. It just seems kind of like a perfect marriage, and wonderful things come out of that.
Yeah, the sky is the limit if everybody's invested.
Yeah. I've noticed as you brought some of the various programs to Athens over the years that I've been here, that there is almost always a piece of new music on the program. And that really is, demonstrative of your commitment to contemporary music, and people have this opportunity to experience this new work. And what's generally been the reaction to the audience over the years? A lot of times we can hear the phrase new music. That can be a little bit scary, but it also can be a way to really discover things that have been unknown to us and can be like unwrapping a present sometimes. What's been your experience with the audiences in Atlanta and elsewhere as you've brought this music out to them?
Well, I think what's been really gratifying here is that these composers that we've lived with most and presented most have developed their own fan clubs, which is just great to see. And it's not necessarily the same fan club for each composer. They have some different groups of people, which I think is telling about how we don't have an audience. We have audiences. People have very different tastes, very different interests and passions and what they want to experience. And we try and keep that in mind and know that we're trying to satisfy a number of those things and make sure our menu is providing much of what people are looking for. So that I'm pretty sure I'm getting the balance right if I'm getting equal amounts of you should be playing more Beethoven or you should be playing more new music. So if I'm getting equal complaints, I start to think, okay, we're getting it right. We want both, because there are people who express both of those opinions. There's people who haven't taken to the new music at all, but then we have this whole other crowd that just wants more and more and more of it. And I'm glad we have both listeners and many other kinds of listeners too. But it is something that we try and balance. And certainly in the world of orchestras, we do a lot more new music than many.
I think that's very insightful, this idea of being aware of that you have audiences rather than just one. There's not just one group of people who come.
The thing I've learned about that is that any individual represents the entire audience in their own mind.
Yeah.
So you just have to keep listening to everybody.
Right. Now, a couple of years ago, I'm going to shift over to maybe your career away from Atlanta, and you made your debut conducting Marnie at the Metropolitan Opera. Tell us a little bit about what that experience was like.
Oh, it was a dream. It was just a dream. You rarely, I don't want to shock anyone, but there are divas in opera.
Really?
Yes. And you rarely have the opportunity in the operatic world where everything just works. Everybody's on board. Everybody's working together. Everybody's listening to each other. Everybody knows what they're doing. And it's just a joyride when that happens. And that's what we had. Nico is just one of the greatest people to work with in the world. The cast we had was stunning, but not only because of the quality of their singing and music making, but also their characters and how they were with each other and how they were with Nico and how we were able to put it all together. The chorus is unbelievable. They're just magnificent. The orchestra's fantastic. The director and the composer and I were all in cahoots, enjoying hearing feedback and sharing our thoughts and creativity with each other. So it became just one of the highlights of my life. And I will never forget doing that show. It was just such a gift in my life and such a great experience. I hit the jackpot.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, how were you involved, I guess, with Nico in kind of the development of that? In what way were you working with him to shape it or prepare it for its premiere?
I heard the world premiere in London the year before, and he had done extensive revision after that world premiere. But he continued to revise in rehearsals. So during our rehearsal process, he continued to change things. It's a little scary, but it's exhilarating. If you can just hang on and go for the ride, it's exhilarating because he's responding to the needs. If you think about operatic timing, there is this necessity to find the marriage in some way of what satisfies the musical unfolding, but also satisfies the dramatic unfolding of what's going on stage. And those timings don't always mesh easily. And historically, there are many ways of dealing with the fact that they don't. Certainly in 18th century opera, we're dealing with recitative to propel the drama and arias and ensembles to allow the music to have its time to unfold. By the time we get to Wagner, he doesn't care much about the drama unfolding quickly, and he completely gets subsumed in the musical time. Puccini finds that other version where, when you think about it, all those great Puccini arias are a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes long, because he never wants to give up the propulsion of the theatrical time in the show. He's actually an amazingly theatrical timed composer in that way. And Nico was very sensitive to this. So if something didn't feel right in terms of the unfolding of the whole picture, he wanted to tinker with it and make it better and make it work. Or if he found something was going to sound better with a particular singer, he wanted to provide material that was going to make them shine. So there was this wonderful open-mindedness and adaptability on his part that he wanted to keep creating that. At a certain point, I remember we all had to say, okay, Nico, you can't do anything else. It's just too late. People have to have the music they're going to do in the end, and we've got to just stick with it. But I loved that part of the process as well. And it was effective. It really changed the flow of the show, the things that he did. There was even one magnificent aria that really wasn't in the right place in the opera, and we all kind of started to recognize that. And Nico said, well, let's cut it. And I said, Nico, I don't know, how can you do, I'm in love with that aria. How can you give it up? He said, oh, it'll be fine. I'll get it in a concerto somewhere. But he had that intelligence to know that respecting the needs of the whole event was worth it.
That's challenging for, I think, a lot of writers and composers who are, spending so much time developing and birthing this creative work. You have to be willing to make cuts and snips and let go of the things that you really cherish sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, and many composers won't. They simply won't. No, we're not cutting that. It's too beautiful.
Yeah. And have you been, as you've worked with all of these contemporary composers on the pieces that have premiered with the Atlanta Symphony over the years, have you been able to, you've probably seen all different types of composers in terms of their willingness to collaborate and shape what will ultimately take to the stage. And I guess it seems like you really enjoy that process quite a lot.
I do. And if I like somebody's music, I can enjoy them being inflexible too, if that's their character. If I like their music, the whole range of characters is welcome for me.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So as you look to your future and the things that are coming up for you, what are some of the things that you are excited about and looking forward to? Projects? Anything come to mind?
The first thing that comes to mind is opening things up again, because I'm looking forward to having a live audience. I'm hopeful and looking forward to the Aspen Music Festival happening next summer, because it did not happen this summer. I'm sure that as audiences return to live musical events, they're going to feel as overwhelmed in a good way as we have felt coming back together and making live music. So it's just, I'm chomping at the bit for that to happen. Assuming things do open up, and what's planned for me, I'm really looking forward to a little more opera in my life than I've had. It's very difficult to schedule. Opera takes more time, and it's difficult to schedule those opportunities when I'm also a full-time music director here. I've been able to do it over the years, and I've been very happy to keep my operatic life alive, but I'll have time to do a little more of that now. And I'm looking forward to that immensely, because there's something about the human voice that that makes it incredibly special.
I agree. Yeah, and I've noticed as I think back through some of your programming choices, there is a lot of, I mean, not overly so, but there's a good emphasis on the voice in various programs, and that's something I personally appreciated because I love choral music and vocal music. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you like it too. What do you think about the role of an orchestra in an American city these days? Atlanta is a big bustling metro, and has, of course, the Atlanta Symphony is a wonderful world-class orchestra. Do you think there's a specific role that an orchestra plays in a city like Atlanta or other cities?
I do. I think that our role to play is to connect. I don't mean to be overly vague, but connectivity is everything. Coming to UGA is part of that in my mind. Going to Kennesaw State is part of that in my mind. And all kinds of other ways. How do we connect with various, in the same way we have multiple audiences, we have multiple communities. How do we connect with various communities, and how can we be a vital part of the city's life? For me, is always what we're looking for and what we would strive to do. I think the times I have felt that we most were able to do that were the times when we were able to be responsive to something in the moment, like doing the concert after 9/11 in 2001 that became something very healing and powerful for the people who were there, for that community. When we played for Coretta Scott King's homegoing service, and we were part of that event, that was a kind of connectivity. When we did the national anthem for a Falcons game, and we were out on the field, I thought that was great. Or when I was at a Braves game, and we used to have, I don't know if they still use it, but they had a video of us doing the William Tell Overture. That's important to me. Any and all the ways we can be part of the city's life, I think, is what any orchestra needs to do. Especially as we look to having the model that kept orchestras alive for decades. Now there are shifts in the way funding is working and the way people are accessing and using their time and their entertainment dollars. We're in a state of looking, a lot of people can talk about the gloom and doom. I don't feel it's so gloomy doomy. I think it's more, we are in a period where we will need to evolve, and I believe we will. And I don't always know what that looks like, but I know it has to do with that connectivity and with being a vital, connected part of where we live.
Yeah, that's great. I think a lot of it will, for an organization that is in touch with the community and what's going on, probably a lot of that evolution will just happen organically as new things are discovered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I know that the city of Atlanta and certainly Athens, we appreciate the Atlanta Symphony very much and always look forward to the visits of the orchestra to UGA, and can't wait to have that happen again.
Well, your hall is just so magnificent. It's really a joy to play there.
Oh, it is really a gem. We feel fortunate to have it here.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. We're so grateful for your time that you took today to share some of your thoughts. And, we're fortunate we get to see you perform and lead the musicians every time, but we don't often get to know you at all. So this has been a lot of fun, and we're really appreciative of your service to the orchestra and your willingness to spend some time with us this afternoon.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. You too. All right. Well, that was great. Fantastic to talk to Robert Spano today, music director of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. I just wanted to be sure you know that Robert, who is also a concert pianist, will be sharing the stage here in Hodson Concert Hall, assuming the world returns to some sense of normalcy by then. On March 22nd, he'll perform a recital with Robert McDuffie. So we're very much looking forward to that performance. And of course, we'll welcome the Atlanta Symphony back as soon as possible. We are going to continue our Arts Chat series coming up, as I mentioned before, on October 12th. Wynton Marsalis will be here. He is the artistic director of jazz at Lincoln Center. And you can find all the information about this and any of our upcoming programs on our website, pac.uga.edu. Thank you so much for joining us today.